You ever step outside for a quiet morning with your coffee, only to find your backyard turning into a swamp of raw sewage? Yeah, that was my Saturday, and let me tell you, it wasn't the sunrise I was expecting. One second I'm breathing in the smell of fresh-cut grass. The next I'm gagging, staring at a bubbling brown mess where my vegetable garden used to be. It all started when I flushed the toilet, innocent enough, right? I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, planning to weed my zucchini patch, when I noticed this foul stench creeping through the air. I followed it outside, barefoot, thinking maybe a pipe burst or a sprinkler went rogue. But what I found stopped me dead: my sewer line. The one that carries every flush and dishwater rinse out of my house was hacked clean through, spewing straight into my garden beds. No cracks, no wear and tear, just a deliberate, surgical cut. Someone had taken a saw to it, and they didn't even bother to cap it. My tomatoes were drowning in. Well, you get the picture. I live in a quiet little neighborhood in Willow Creek, a suburban slice of Arizona where the lawns are manicured and the HOA rules thicker than a phone book. I'm Jake, by the way, a civil engineer who spent a decade designing water systems for cities. I'm also the guy who decided to live a little greener: solar panels, rainwater barrels, a water system to recycle laundry water for my garden. To me, it's common sense. To the HOA, it's a rebellion. And the queen of that HOA, Diane, had been gunning for me since the day I moved in. Diane's the kind of person who'd measure your grass with a ruler and fine you if it's half an inch too long. She'd sent me 6 violation notices in the past year alone. My compost bin was unsightly. My native cactus garden was unkempt. My solar panels were an aesthetic violation. She even called my rain barrels a public health hazard. At the last HOA meeting, she leaned across the table, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Jake, you're dragging this community down with your experiments." Experiments. That's what she called living sustainably. So, standing there, knee-deep in my ruined garden, it clicked. This wasn't an accident. This was Diane. I called my buddy Tom, a plumber who's seen worse messes than this. He showed up, took one look at the pipe, and shook his head. "This ain't tree roots, Jake. Someone took a hacksaw to it, and they meant business. You're looking at $5,000 to fix this, minimum. Unless you can reroute it through the main line. $5,000. My fists clenched so hard I thought my knuckles would pop. But then I remembered something: my trail cam. I'd set it up last summer to catch whatever was knocking over my compost bins. Maybe, just maybe, it caught something else. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, scrolling through grainy footage. A coyote at 2 a.m. A stray cat at dawn. And then, there she was, Diane, in a neon pink tracksuit, climbing my fence at midnight with a flashlight in her mouth and a hacksaw in her hand. She looked like a discount cat burglar, sipping from a thermos like she was on a gardening break. She crouched by the pipe, sawed it clean through, checked her smartwatch, and strolled back to her house like she'd just watered her petunias. I played it back 3 times, jaw on the floor, just to make sure I wasn't dreaming. This wasn't just vandalism, this was war. I could have called the cops right then, pressed charges, dragged her to court. But Diane didn't just cut my pipe. She tried to break me, to paint me as the weird eco guy who didn't belong in her perfect little HOA kingdom. And that's when I decided, if she wanted to play dirty, I'd play smarter. See, I'm not just some guy with a compost bin. I know pipes, how they flow, where they connect, and where they fail. And I knew Diane's pristine house, with its koi pond and rose bushes, was hooked to an old, rickety water system that hadn't been updated since the neighborhood was built. That's where I'd hit her, not with a saw, but with engineering. I pulled out my old county blueprints, the ones I kept from my consulting days. This neighborhood's plumbing was a mess of shortcuts and forgotten valves, the kind of system developers slapped together to save a buck. Buried under the community rose garden, right by Diane's property, was an old maintenance valve tied to the irrigation system. It was perfect, hidden, unmonitored, and just waiting for someone like me to flip the script. My plan wasn't a flood her yard with sewage that's too crude, too risky. No. I'd redirect just enough of my gray water, laundry runoff, sink water, maybe a splash of compost tea into the HOA's sprinklers. It wouldn't hurt anyone, but it'd make her morning smell like regret. Poetic, right? Before I could pull it off, I needed to know how Diane got away with this. I dug into the HOA bylaws, and there it was, a shady little clause about emergency sanitation measures. It was meant for burst pipes or natural disasters, but Diane had twisted it to call my gray water system a community hazard. No vote, no notice, just her playing judge and jury with a hacksaw. I called a lawyer, Sarah, who'd taken down HOAs before. She watched the footage, smirked, and said, "She's got no leg to stand on. Trespassing, vandalism, utility tampering, you've got her dead to rights." But lawsuits take months, and my backyard was still a biohazard. I needed something faster. Then I talked to Mike, Diane's next-door neighbor, a retired guy who loved his lawn gnomes and black coffee. Over a beer, he spilled the real dirt. Diane's son, Ethan, was a real estate agent looking to flip houses in the neighborhood. Diane was targeting people like me, folks who didn't fit her cookie-cutter vision, to drive us out, lower property values, and let Ethan swoop in. My solar panels and rain barrels weren't just an eyesore, they were a threat to her family's side hustle. That's when it hit me. This wasn't personal. It was business. And I was about to make it very unprofitable. At midnight, I slipped into the rose garden with a headlamp, a shovel, and a bag of tools. The ground was soft, overwatered from the sprinklers. 10 steps from the big oak tree, my shovel hit concrete, a rusty valve box, exactly where the blueprints said it'd be. I pried it open, and there it was, an old irrigation valve. Forgotten, but functional. With a few twists and a coupling from my workshop, I tied my gray water line into the HOA's sprinkler system. Nothing toxic, just soapy runoff and a hint of compost funk. Pumped out in short bursts at 4 a.m. when the sprinklers kicked on. I tested it that night, and sure enough, a faint whiff of laundry detergent and earth drifted across the garden. Subtle, legal, and oh so satisfying. By the next HOA meeting, Diane was losing it. "The water smells like a swamp," she shrieked, slamming her fist on the table. "My koi are swimming in sludge." The board rolled their eyes. Nobody else had noticed yet. But over the next week, it spread. Neighbors started whispering about yellow grass, weird stains on their patios, a funky taste in their tap water. Diane demanded the HOA hire a testing company. The city blamed old pipes. The HOA blamed the city. And I just sat back, sipping my coffee, watching the chaos unfold. Things got wild when Diane called the EPA, screaming about a federal-level contamination. I nearly choked on my toast when I saw the white SUV pull up. Out stepped Lisa, an old colleague from my water treatment days. She took one look at me, grinned, and said, "Jake, still stirring up trouble?" I showed her the footage of Diane's midnight saw job. She took samples, inspected my temporary sewer fix, and wrote up a citation. Not for me, but for Diane. Trespassing, tampering, negligence, the works. The board looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. Diane tried to argue, her voice hitting a pitch that could shatter glass, but Lisa just held up her clipboard and said, "Ma'am, you're lucky it's not a felony." The neighborhood turned on her fast. The sprinklers got shut off. The clubhouse pool closed right before summer break. Kids were furious, parents were livid. And the HOA treasurer started muttering about mismanagement fees to replace the contaminated landscaping. Diane's perfect image, her koi pond, her rose bushes, her Instagram-ready backyard, was falling apart. Her fountain turned murky, her hedges curled, and someone posted a meme of her house labeled the Bog of Willow Creek. I didn't start it, but I sure didn't stop it. For one final twist, before the EPA sealed the valve for good, I cranked up the gray water pump for a farewell blast. I mixed in some sulfur-rich fertilizer. Nothing dangerous, just potent. That morning, the rose garden smelled like a compost pile on a hot day. Landscapers in hazmat masks were shoveling mulch while Diane stood there, yelling about her ruined shoes. A kid biking by held his nose and shouted, "What died out here?" I watched from my porch, lemonade in hand, trying not to laugh too loud. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, without Diane. They voted to strip her of her presidency, lock her out of the clubhouse, even block her from the HOA email. She found out when her iPad flashed, "Access denied." I saw her in her driveway, screaming at her screen, then chucking her phone into the grass. Her husband just picked it up and walked away. That night, I sat in my hammock, watching the lights flicker in her house. She was pacing, unraveling, not because I'd fought her head on, but because I'd let her own system choke her out. Everything she'd built, her rules, her power, her control, was collapsing under the weight of her own mistakes. Diane tried one last stand, going door to door with flyers claiming I'd built an illegal wastewater empire. She drew a cartoon of me as a mad scientist with a hose, which, honestly, I framed. But nobody was buying it. Neighbors started closing their doors in her face. Her lawn wilted, her fountain shut off, and her social media went quiet. Then the local news got wind of the EPA report. They aired a segment called HOA Horror or Neighbor's Revenge and played a blurred clip of Diane sawing my pipe. Her voice was unmistakable. Overnight, the neighborhood group chat blew up. And someone set her mid-saw grimace as the profile pic. Brutal. A few days later, a group of neighbors showed up at my door. Mike, the gnome guy, grinned and said, "Jake, we know you did something. Don't deny it. Just tell us how." I laughed, they laughed, and we spent the evening on my porch, swapping stories about Diane's reign of terror. One woman said Diane once fined her for having 2 blue curtains. Another swore she got a warning for her kids' chalk drawings. It felt like the neighborhood was waking up. Shaking off years of fear, Diane left not long after. No for sale sign, no big announcement, just a quiet exit in her SUV, boxes piled in the back. I didn't wave. I just watered my sunflowers and let her fade into the rear view. The HOA changed after that. The new board scrapped the old rules, even asked me to help write a water conservation policy. The city took it a step further. They loved my gray water setup so much they made my house a demo site for sustainable living. They bolted a plaque to my wall that reads, "Recognized for community resilience. Diane's swamp water empire jab?" Yeah, I'd say I won that one. But here's the thing, part of me wonders if I went too far. I didn't break any laws. Didn't hurt anyone, but I played her game, just sneakier. Was it justice? Or was it just revenge dressed up in blueprints? I got a letter from her after she left, no return address. Just a single line. "Hope you're happy with your little victory, Pipe Man." I laughed, but it stuck with me. Maybe she was right about one thing. We're all fighting for control in our own way. So, what do you think? Was I the hero here, or just another neighbor with a grudge? Have you ever had an HOA tyrant like Diane? Or maybe you've pulled off your own quiet comeback? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear your stories. The crazier the better. And if you like this wild ride, give it a thumbs up, mediator. Up and share it with someone who'd get a kick out of Diane's swampy downfall. Let's keep the neighborhood drama flowing.